Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Southern Fried Geekery Podcast. As per usual, I'm Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
Matt Trogdon.
And Craig Lane.
And it is good to be back for another episode of the Southern Fried Geekery Podcast. If I'm not mistaken, let me look at my El Listo here. I think this is episode 135. Check me on that, Matt.
I can't count that high, so Matt will have to tell you.
1, 2, 3. Yep, that's right.
Ooh, look at me. Nailing it. Starting off strong this morning. How are you guys doing this week?
Tired and sore, but I'm good.
Yep, same here. But I'm tired, I'm sore, but my soul is so much richer for it.
See, I'm dealing with like finger cramps this morning just from a hard day of typing. That was my day yesterday. No, so you guys helped the local proprietor of Kapow Comics over in Sherwood move his shop yesterday, correct?
We certainly did.
Nice. How'd that go?
It was the hardest work I have done since I can remember. I cannot remember working that hard, but it was also a lot of fun because everybody around there was helping out because they wanted to. And when you got a bunch of people doing stuff because they want to, everybody's in a good mood and everybody's having fun. So we were joking around the whole time that we were trying not to get dehydrated and pass out.
Yeah, I mean, that's 100% true. It was just kind of a good excuse to hang out with our buddies and do stuff.
Nice. Drink plenty of water?
Mountain Dews, but yeah, he didn't have water.
That's terrible, Craig. You should not be drinking Mountain Dew.
What did he have? 3 waters?
He didn't have. I brought some of my own, so I was drinking mine.
Yeah.
Well, glad you guys had a good time. See, I didn't show up because I didn't want to. So exactly what Matt was saying. It's you have to be with people that you want to be there, and I didn't want to be there, so I wasn't there.
Yeah.
No, I got stuck working from home yesterday. It was stupid. So also sending Matt text of Grimlock. That was a thing.
Yeah. Little side note there.
Yeah. One text message that turned into a story about how I did nothing but read comics yesterday.
Yeah.
But no, it was good times. Glad to see all that stuff that got moved. I'm sure Matt, the proprietor, really appreciates it. Not, our Matt, but also Matt, the owner of the store, appreciates that. So how is, other than that and all that strenuous activity that you manly men did yesterday, how'd everything else go this week?
Good. It's been a fairly good week for me.
Nice.
Pretty much on the level with the past several weeks for me. A lot of not leaving the house due to COVID-19, unfortunately.
Yeah. COVID-19 made the end of my week stupid. So the governor put out, we now have in Arkansas, where all of us are, we have a mask mandate where you have to wear a mask even though it's really not necessarily enforceable and kind of doesn't have teeth. But that happened, I think, on Thursday and completely fucked up my plans for doing anything worthwhile this weekend. But, it's Sunday, so I get to talk to my booze and we get to talk about some things like comics. If you want to talk about more things like comics and you find yourself maybe in the middle of the week feeling yourself on a nerd shortage and you want to recharge that nerd battery, you should totally jump over to our Facebook group. We're at Southern Fried Geekery on Facebook and recharge it. Or you can check us out on Twitter and Instagram. We're at SFG on both of those. And should, in the midst of you recharging your nerd batteries, you develop in your mind, thinking these great thoughts that you think, a query, if you will, and you want to ask us a question, maybe you have a conundrum, maybe you have something that you need answered, you can shoot us an email at southernfriedgeekery@gmail.com. And if it's a hard one, I'm going to forward it to Craig because Craig is the person who answers the hard questions.
Yeah, don't send me your shit about Thor.
I'm so... I'm just going to let that thread remain on its own.
Yeah.
Fun times. So it's been kind of a light week, a light couple of weeks for comics. The industry the gears are turning. It's jumping back up. It's going again. The spice is flowing, if you will, but it's I don't know. Is it flowing or is it trickling?
It's been turned back on, and we're getting a little trickle of what's coming.
Yeah, but because it's not in full force, I don't know about you guys. I know Craig, you had mentioned that your new comic stack has been light. I think I bought maybe 6 new comics last week, which is that's about 40% of what I normally bring home on a
I
given
had
week.
about 7 or 8 new comics this week, which is, you guys know, for me is low.
Yeah. And the reason I say that is because, because of that, we're just kind of gloss over and skip over what we normally do, where we have short stacks, where we mention like 3 things we read this week, real short. We're just going to kind of gloss over that and give some time to build back up because, it would be just the entirety of our pull list, I think, and we'd be sharing titles and it would all just be the same book. So, why do that? We can just forego that and talk about some stuff that we did read and did enjoy, right?
Yeah. Well, it's not going away forever, just until the comics are full stream again.
Yeah, we'll get them back. It, it's
Yeah.
it's 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 weird because we talk throughout the week. Behind the scenes secrets. We have a text thread that we use to kind of plan on not sounding dumb. And so we were talking about like what are you going to talk about this week? Well, these are the 3 books that I read. Shit, those are the 3 books that I read too. And so it ended up being just oh man, how are we going to do this? So yeah, we're putting that
Yeah.
on pause for the short future. We'll bring it back, but we got plenty of other stuff to talk about, right?
Yeah, we got enough to talk about.
Yeah, I think we
Fill
do.
up a show, maybe.
Fill it up. Is it gonna be full?
Maybe.
I feel like this might be this particular episode might be a glass half empty kind of thing. I don't know. I'm
Yeah,
joking.
we'll
So
do. Yeah.
last week, as we were closing out the show and we were doing what we always do, Matt encouraged folks. He took a chance. He said, "Hey, this book is coming out next week, and you might want to go pick it up because of. I think if I remember right, particularly because of the creative team, the writer on it. It was an individual who is legend in the industry. And that book was 2020 iWolverine #1, written by Larry Hama, drawn by Roland Boschi, colored by Andreas Massa, with letters by Mr. Joe Sabino from CV. And so this week we decided, hey, since that came out, Matt was really excited about it. We all love Wolverine. We'll check it out. We'll make that our roundtable book. And we did. We all read it. We all checked it out. We're gonna talk about it for a little bit. So, with that being said, just a little bit of a spoiler warning for the rest of the show because we do talk about comics. Some of them are relatively new, and there's no real way to do that without ruining it for people who haven't read it. So, if you haven't read any of the books we talk about, go check the show notes, see what we're talking about. But hit the little pause button. Go consume it. Go read it. Go commit it to your memory and then come back and listen to us wax poetic. Well, I'm going to say stupid shit, but the other guys are going to wax poetic about it. So
Whatever.
check it out. So before we dive into the bulk of the book and we really talk about what the story was, what did you guys think about this issue? Thumbs up, thumbs down?
Go ahead, Matt.
Oh, that's a tough one. Let me ask this. Let me answer your question first. Nostalgia, nostalgia with a capital N for me. And I could not help but like the story because of my experience with Larry Hama and his past with Wolverine.
Okay, that's fair. I'll give it a thumb sideways.
Okay.
I'm kind of lukewarm on the whole thing.
I'm somewhere. I'm not somewhere in the middle. I think I'm somewhere slightly below Craig with the thumb sideways, but that's with an asterisk that loops around to exactly what Matt said.
Asterisk.
Yeah. Did I say it wrong? I can't.
Said asterisk. I don't know what an asterisk
is.
Asterisk. I can't say words. It's exactly what Matt said. It's the nostalgia. It's the going back and visiting some of the locations and seeing some of the characters and revisiting Larry Hama writing comics. That part I absolutely loved. The art, yeah, meh. Um, the story, parts of the story I found kind of lackluster. But yeah. So even though I'd like, this is not something that I'm gonna remember by Tuesday. I didn't hate it. I think that there were some interesting things presented by the story, and honestly, as we get into it, and we'll talk about later, there is some concepts and some issues about ethics that I think the story brings up that I think are worth exploring, and I wonder if those were on Larry Hama's mind. So, but without further ado, let's actually talk about what the story was, not our judgments on it. So, like I said, the story is iWolverine 2020. Again, written by Larry Hama. The bulk of the art duties were done by Roland Boschi, colored by Andreas Massa, and letters by VC's Joe Sabino. So the story starts off. We are back in Madripoor, which, look, if you're a Wolverine fan, you got to love Madripoor. You love when we revisit there. And there are some Yakuza members who are, they're rich and powerful gangsters. If you're not familiar with the Yakuza, and maybe you haven't read a bunch of these stories, it's essentially the Japanese mafia. And they're doing their thing. They're kind of, in a high-rise overlooking the city, penthouse, just being kind of rich and powerful. They have a pet chimpanzee that puts a golf ball on a tee for them as they shoot golf balls off into the city, in a very carefree manner and nonchalantly not giving a shit about who the ball might hit. And so they're sitting there discussing just gangsterish things, like what do gangsters talk about? They just shanking folks and throwing people into trunks, or I don't know, maybe something like that, as they hit golf balls off into the city. But what one of the, I don't know if you want to call them employees, one of the sub gangsters that comes in and is like, "Hey, we just got a hit on some of the facial recognition software that we have installed in places where we do generally bad, scummy type things, and you're not gonna believe this." Down in Lowtown in Madripoor, at a bar, at the Princess Bar of all places, Patch is back. And now, when I read that, hairs stood up on the back of my neck. Right? I don't know if you guys had that experience. I'm like, oh, we're like, we're getting to the meat and potatoes of just Wolverine history. And so it cuts to the Princess Bar, and sure enough, there's a dude who looks a lot like Patch, looks a lot like Wolverine, sitting at a bar having a drink, kind of cloaked. He's kind of obscured by. He's doing the whole trench coat and scary hat thing, to where he's trying to pretend like nobody knows who he is. And he's ordering a drink, but he's not necessarily fooling anyone. Or, I mean, kind of he is, but not in the way that he means to. This bar is owned by Tiger, who has a long and, I say long, who has a history in the relationship of Wolverine and Madripoor. And she recognizes this figure right off the bat, and she walks up and she was like, "I can't believe you're back. I knew you weren't dead, yada, yada, yada." And then he turns around to look at her, and it's not Wolverine at all. It's a cyborg. It's a cyborg named Albert, he was created by none other than Donald Pierce of Reaver's fame to be Wolverine, to get used against Wolverine, and he's back looking for other AI, and he's back looking for Donald Pierce because Donald has been essentially part of this 2020 thing is this story that involves Tony Stark and AI, and there's kind of an artificial intelligence war going on in the background. You don't really need to know any of that information before you dive into the story, but it does help kind of set the scene and give some context to why Albert is in Madripoor and who he's looking for. And who he's looking for is, she's another cyborg, but she's representative of a little girl named LCD. And LCD, again, created using mechanics, using Wolverine's history, kind of I don't necessarily want to say it's a Laura type thing, or a Honey Badger type thing, but it's invocative of that, I think, once if you have that history, and you've read the X-23 stories and everything. But it doesn't tap into that, but I think that should be in the back of your head while you're reading it. And so he's, he looks at her and is like, "Hey, I know I'm not supposed to be here, but you know why I'm here. I'm trying to find this information." And she can help with that a little bit. She's always got her thumb on the pulse of Madripoor's underground, um, and she's got enough pull in the community, the criminal community, that she can essentially get whatever she wants. Uh, but right at that exact moment, where they're kind of getting to the point, the Yakuza busts in. These gangsters, they show up, and they're ready to start gunning folks down because they think this is Patch. Well, this is a mistake on two fronts. Number one, if it was Patch, the fuck are you going to do with a machine gun? You know better. Even though it's not Patch. But number two, you don't get to just roll up in Tiger's bar, packing heat and blowing holes in the wall and not have some bad shit happen to you. She's a criminal force in and of her own right. So essentially, these people die. They just don't get to live anymore, and it really reinforces Tiger's willingness or want to help Albert the cyborg, because she sees this as a personal affront, and so she kind of gives him a direction. She points him in the right places, some of which she owns, and she's just kind of like, I'd love it if you would avoid trashing my business too much. So where she points him to is the RUR, which is ran by Donald Pierce. It stands for Reavers Universal Robotics, and they're in Uptown or Hightown, whatever you want to call it, the area of Madripoor that's more fancy. You got to wear a tie when you go to places. Well, this is where the Reavers are hiding and where Pierce has got them stashed at. And so she lets him know where to go, and he heads up that way. And as he's going, some of the Reavers, like Bonebreaker, remember that guy who only has a torso and has little spindly spider legs? He notices them coming up, and so he essentially just calls ahead and says, hey, we got company, and this could turn out really poorly for all of us, but you need to get ready. Well, Pierce kind of, as they are want to assault Albert, Pierce has another idea. He sees Albert as property. He sees Albert as a potential for profit. And they surround Albert, and Pierce comes out, and he essentially gives him a tour of the operations and just kind of lets him know what he's been up to. You know how villains, they love to tell you kind of a monologue-y version of villainy. And that's what's going on with this. So he's walking him through, and he's showing everything, like, I've been upgrading all these systems, and we can produce a better product. We can make Albert 2.0 even, and you're surrounded here, and you're not going to get out. So why don't you just turn yourself over? This is the reason we've collected all the other AI as well, including LCD, the little girl. Also, did you guys notice? And maybe it's just me. I don't know if LCD is a new character, but it's spelled ELSIDEE. Or something like that, but I'm always thinking liquid crystal display, like a TV. So I'm sure that's what it's from. I've never had any history with that character, but they essentially get.
It made me think of LMD.
Yeah, that too. Essentially, Albert gets everybody in the middle of the room, and they attack him because he's not going down. He's no one's property. He's not he's not just some random laptop you can repossess. He's an AI. He's sentient, and he's going to fight for his life and his freedom, and to find everyone else. And he just kind of slaughters everybody, and tortures them to the point that he finds out where that they are keeping LCD, which of course is. It's in and around Madripoor. It's everywhere. They have broken LCD down, and they send her arms to part of the Yakuza. They send her torso to somebody else, and her head, of course, they have sold to some really, really highfalutin gangsters. In fact, they were the gangsters that were sent to head quote unquote patch off in the first place. And so he rolls up to the high rise. He runs a golf game or two as they were in there putt-putting around, and being drawn by somebody who I think maybe has never watched somebody swing a golf club in their life. And they are using little LCD, cute little blonde LCD. They are using her head essentially as a, tax computation form. She's essentially a creative accountant. She's helping launder money. So, you know, I don't know about you guys, but when the end of the year rolls up and you get to, she's essentially gangster TurboTax is what she is, and he's not having that. He goes all in, you know, just tracks down each and every piece of her, ruins like essentially in one fell swoop. He puts a big blow into the black market economy of Madripoor, which essentially is all Madripoor is. You know, one company is using part of LCD's products to make knockoffs, little Iron Man dolls. Another company is she's just being used and abused all over the place. Well, he goes about the business of recollecting her with a vengeance, and of course he's doing all of this while toting her little girl head around like a football, and you know, launching the head at bad guys and letting her bite them on the ear. You know, really kind of cheesy comical moments. Towards the end of the story, he has wrecked shop. He's gotten all the pieces of her back together, and he puts her back together. He Pinocchios her. She's a real girl now. Resets a few things, and now
Pinocchios her.
yeah, I mean, now they're kind of ready to enact vengeance on everybody: the RUR, the casino owners, you know, the factory workers and owners, and all the people who were abusing LCD for criminal gain, and inevitably abusing the idea of AI as property. And that's going to go into the next issue. This is going to be a 2-issue series. The next issue is great. It's got a picture of LCD and her cute little girl, kind of, as she says, it's totally anime. It's really cute. Little Elizabethan girl outfit sitting on a pile of scrap metal and the body of... that's what the next cover is going to look like. Making a face that was not unlike the face that I had when I finished reading this issue. So I'm probably, personally, just full disclosure, probably not going to pick up the next issue. I don't know that this got me invested enough, but it really was, like Matt said, it was nice to go back and revisit this world. I read, you know, I think I've told you guys and the folks who have listened to the show before, I'm a big fan of the Marvel Comics Presents comic that came out, you know, years ago. It was kind of an anthology series that, you know, each issue you got 4 or 5 parts of a bigger story, and most of them featured Wolverine. And a lot of them were in this world. A lot of them were the Patch era Wolverine. A lot of them were Madripoor based, and just kind of giving his history into being a Ronin in this sometimes generically East Asian culture, as he just kind of exists and fights bad guys. It was fun revisiting that. It was fun seeing some of those same places, you know, seeing Tiger again. It was fun revisiting the Princess Bar and going back to Madripoor. So, so what did you, you know, I've kind of said enough here. I want to hear you guys talk on it. What did you think?
Yeah, you know, I'm not going to pick up the second issue. And, I mean, I found, and I love Larry Hama, so, you know, let me just put that out there. But I found most of this book to just be absurd. So,
how was this more absurd than in any given comic book?
I don't know. As I was part of it was her lisp. I mean, it drove me nuts for some reason. I mean, she's a android, and they give her a lisp. That to me was weird. I don't know. As I was reading it, and maybe it's just that it didn't grab me, Matt, because, you know, on some level, most superhero comic books do have a level of absurdity in them. So I'll grant you that, but it just didn't do it for me, and that's okay. It's just not a book for me. And I love Wolverine.
Well, Wolverine's not even in this book.
I know. Yeah. That was part of my problem with it, to be honest with you.
So did either one of you read the original Larry Hama, you know, this iWolverine run?
I did not, actually.
I've read parts of it. So that's actually a series that I've got. I don't have a full run of it. I've got big chunks of it, but they're not all connected. But a lot of that stuff came out, and again, this is an issue with me being kind of a late '90s, mid 2000s comic reader. When I started, is I missed quite a bit of that, and it's always been a for me. It's always been something that I need to go back and read. And go back and experience. And I have in chunks in little bits and pieces of different storylines, but I've never read it in its entirety.
So you're not familiar with LCD?
No, that was a blind spot for me.
So she's a very big part of that run. She and Albert are a team for a long time in that Larry Hama run, illustrated
maybe
mostly
that would
by.
make a difference to me.
Oh, it'll make all the difference. Because it's the background of the story. I mean, if you don't know that going into this, you don't have that background, to rest your experience on. Right. But yeah, Albert and LCD, yeah, that was a long running thing in the Larry Hama run, mostly illustrated by Mark Silvestri. Mm-hmm. So this whole setting, this whole comic book was very, very familiar to me. And again, I mentioned nostalgia because I'm thinking back to when I was reading it at the time. And, when Larry Hama became the next regular writer for the series after Chris Clairmont dropped off, he and John Buscema dropped off about the same time. And, they had different creative teams that kind of came in until Larry Hama and Silvestri came in and pretty much stuck. And they were the permanent run. And this was these two characters were a big part of that run because the Reavers were a big part of that run. Mm-hmm. And it's just a fun adventure comic book story. This is nothing that's going to cause you a lot of great introspection. It's not that kind of story. It's essentially barely more than just a surface level adventure story. You do have some moral. You have the moral question of when does AI become not artificial life, but life actually? It does touch on that. I mean, that's prominent throughout his run when you're talking about these two characters. But for the most part, it's just a fun romp is what it is. And it's not, and walking into this, not having that background, I can see how reading this, you'd be like, what the fuck is going on here?
And that's what happened to me, to be honest with you. I was completely lost from the beginning of this because there was a section of time where I just didn't read comics, and I haven't, made it back through all of that time period yet. Eventually I will, or at least hit the high points. Yeah. So.
But as far as, to answer your why did they give her question, they didn't really give her that. Her and Albert both have speech impediments in their programming because it reflects the fault in their programming. It reflects that these are things aren't going to plan.
Well, one of my favorite moments in this book was when Pierce asked him, you've got all these upgrades. Why didn't you fix your speech impediment? And he goes, what speech impediment?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, for me, I knew that neither one of these were new characters, in the history of the comics. Like I knew that they had existed because I did a little bit of Googling, but it's just still, again, like you said, Matt, not having the history, not having the backup with these. This, what would have actually benefited this book a lot would be a few editor's notes. And I know that we've talked about that in the recent history of the show about how that's something overall missing with especially Big Two comics and these long and storied worlds that we have. But I would have loved to have seen a few editorial notes,
or a page leading into the story that tells you who these characters are. And I'm sorry, I didn't have a chance to Google this morning because I actually read this morning, and I fell back to sleep because I'm exhausted after reading it. So I did not get a chance to Google these characters. But again, either editor's notes or a page at the beginning, telling us who these two characters are, would have given it some context. For sure.
Yeah.
now that I like,
I may
could have.
reread it knowing that.
It would have also benefited heavily from some Mark Silvestri. um,
What? Yeah, but you could say that about any given book.
that's true. Mark, I mean, honestly, Mark Silvestri is my favorite out of the guys who created Image. I've always thought he was the best artist out of those folks. But I'm saying that just I don't want to poo poo on Roland Boschi, but this was not his best performance. As on putting lines on paper, I've seen some of the work he's done before. I know he's a capable creator. There are some panels that I think are really cool. There's some panels that are really outside the box. But then again, there's also something, and I know I mentioned it earlier, but literally where it's on the first page, the dude is hitting a golf ball off the top of the thing, and his positioning is like literally, I don't think he's ever seen somebody swing a golf club before. Um, like everything about the positioning and the motion is just ass backwards. And it doesn't make any sense. And there were some other scenes to where I think there was one scene that if you looked close enough, the person's thumbs were backwards. Um, as far as their positioning, so like again, I just don't think this was a. I don't even want to say it wasn't his best effort. I don't know how much effort he put into it. Um, I also, with my history of the stuff that happened in Madripoor and with the history of the character of Wolverine and the character of Patch and the connectivity to these other AI creations, I love the Reavers. I think the Reavers are fun. I get excited, especially now when I go back and see the Reavers. I was, I mean, number one, I felt disappointed in general when Wolverine was not in this book at all. And I felt like it was a misdirection just to hype off his name and get you to pick up the book. When I totally, like for me personally, would have picked up the book if they had told me the Reavers were in here. But to only see one of the actual Reavers, like to only get Bonebreaker as one of the main Reavers, and to not see any of the rest of them, that was to me poor utilization of those characters because we don't get to see those characters enough anyway. Um, we don't get to see them pop up hardly at all anymore. I mean, I think once 2 years ago they showed up in a book, and I got really excited. Um, but I would have loved to have seen more representation of those characters. To see the dude who has tank legs. He doesn't have you know any legs at all. He's just kind of the bottom half of him as a tank. Or to see Skullbuster. You know, Lady Deathstrike. Even though that would create a continuity loophole for her to pop up and show her face, I don't really think I would have necessarily cared. Because this is kind of a one and done story, but I would have liked to have seen those elements. I felt really underwhelmed when I got to that last page, and the only Reaver that was mentioned by name, at least that I caught and saw, was Bonebreaker. Um, yeah, I felt like there was kind of a lot of misdirection here, especially considering what was on the cover and the title.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the same love for the Reavers that you do, so but I can understand that if you thought that was going to be a thing going in and then it wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, because like I said, they're on the title, or at least on the cover that I had, and I read this digitally, so I got because unfortunately Matt did not have enough on the shelf
Matt,
for me to not this Matt, that Matt. This is why I didn't show up to help him. He didn't have my physical. As I spent yesterday just shaking my fist at the sky. So, but when I logged on, and so I bought it off Comixology, when I logged on to see the cover of it and all of that fun stuff, and it just, that actually piqued my interest. And then to get through the story and it not be anything to do with the majority of those characters, that was just kind of, it was kind of like the air leaving a balloon. So maybe that just.
I have a feeling there'll be more in the second issue.
I hope so. I'm giving Trogdon homework, and he has to tell me that they're there so I can go find it and read it.
I like that they use the old original Wolverine logo on the cover of the book.
Yeah.
I love that logo.
That too.
That is such a great logo. Such a great logo. I don't know why they ever retired.
Well, it fits with the nostalgia of the rest of the book, I guess.
Was it Wolverine #1 that had the cutouts where it looked like Wolverine had actually slashed through the cover? It was like yellow. Or was that on
of the new
series?
Of the new Wolverine?
No, the
series?
old one.
Yes.
No, they didn't do that kind of stuff in that back in the day, dude.
Yeah.
You're talking about the newsprint day.
Yeah. No, it did not have the cutouts.
Okay. I'm just trying to think, because there were some amazing covers from that Wolverine series.
If you're talking about the miniseries, it had the Frank Miller cover that was like a red background and just Logan's face.
Back in our day,
Wolverine's
Sonny,
face.
there weren't variant covers.
No, this wasn't a variant cover. This was and Craig actually might be talking about. It was a gimmick cover, but it wasn't a variant cover. It was.
Yeah, we didn't have those back in the day.
Oh, bullshit!
Yeah, that was later in the series, Caleb.
I read Forceworks #1. I have 4 copies. Don't talk to me about gimmick covers. With the pop-ups. So, well, all right. So, if you are interested, I think that this is a perfect book for somebody like Matt, who has that nostalgia, who has that love, and the context and the background of the series. I don't think this is somebody for me that doesn't particularly have that connectivity to it. And I would have, for me, I land on, I would have thoroughly enjoyed it much more if there wasn't what I perceive to be kind of a misdirection to play off the Wolverine name, and also if there had been editorial notes, that would have helped me out a lot.
I agree.
Yeah, this is a perfect example of a missed opportunity for editorial notes. I mean, this is the best example of that I've seen in a long time, frankly.
I am, like, the thing that I picked up on and appreciated the most in this book, though, was exactly what Matt said with the ethical conundrum of AI. Are they property or are they people? And knowing that apparently Hama that's a major part. And Matt, correct me because you've read it and I haven't, but did he dive deep in it, or was it always just kind of a subtextual notion, or did he really explore what that meant? And I wonder if we could, if that topic deserves a re-exploration in comics today, with characters like Ultron or these characters, and the idea of cloning with the Wolverine kids. What determines whether or not they are property or people? It's
weird because in Marvel it seems like clones it's never a question whether they're people or not. They automatically, seemingly in the Marvel universe, have human rights.
Yeah.
Now,
unless you're the villain who wants to take them away.
Yeah.
But when I think about things like Vision, as a character, where does he fit in that? And I mean, I know this is a topic that has been explored before by some really great writers, but I would love to see Larry Hama's. I would love to hear him talk about it more, especially because this is now 2020, and you think about the technological advances and the advances of AI that we've gone through since he first wrote that series. I mean, it's been, 30 years now? I would love to see a comic that really focuses on and explores that. I mean, Tom King did a little bit in his Vision miniseries, but even he didn't delve too much into it because he had a plot to uphold. But I don't know. I like that idea. That fascinates me more than any of the hyperviolence and the borderline hypo-machismo aspect of what Wolverine comics typically give us. I would have appreciated that more, and still would.
Well, I got to say, I can't remember the last time I read a Wolverine comic that was borderline hyper machismo.
Yeah, I can't either. They're pretty well just hyper machismo.
That's what that might as well be the subtitle for every issue. Hyper machismo.
The hyper machismo.
Yeah. You'll see a lot of borders being tippy-toed.
In many of his comics, he has a lot of introspection. I'm taking those moments and considering him.
Yeah. Which beer to buy?
You know, how does he open it, with his claws or with, with a church key? So, well, Craig, what did you read this week, buddy? Take us out of the world of Larry Hama and androids, or don't. What are you talking about this week, brother?
Well, I'm not going to take us out of the world of Wolverine.
Okay.
Completely coincidentally, I picked up the collected edition of the original Wolverine 4-part miniseries.
Nice.
By Chris Clairmont and Frank Miller. And I've reread that, and it's just completely coincidental. I did not, at the time, know we were going to do iWolverine 2020 as our roundtable book. But so this is, as I said, it's Wolverine #1, published, of course, by Marvel. Chris Claremont wrote it. Frank Miller did the pencils. Joseph Rubinstein did the inks. Glennis Oliver and Lynn Varley were on colors. And Tom Orzechowski, I believe is how you say his name, did the letters. So this book is considered, well, it is his first solo book. And it starts with Wolverine tracking dangerous prey. And you don't immediately know what that prey is, but he tracks it to its lair, which turns out to be a cave. And we find out shortly thereafter that it's a bear, and not just any bear, but a giant grizzly bear. And Wolverine doesn't want to kill the bear, but he's forced to because the bear's been killing humans. And as he kills the bear, he finds a poisoned arrow in the bear's back. And there isn't enough poison on the arrow to kill the bear, just enough to drive the bear insane. So he kills the bear as quickly as he can, and as painlessly as he can. And using the same senses that had allowed him to track the bear, he tracks the hunter that shot the bear with the illegal poisoned arrow, follows him, gets him at a bar. As he says, the bear lasted longer, but he lets the man live, which I thought was a great line. And then after the trial for the hunter, he reaches out to Mariko, the woman he loves, and she refuses to return his calls or even answer the phone. So he boards a plane and heads to Japan. Once in Japan, he's stopped by a friend who is also a Japanese secret agent, Asano Kimura, who tells him that Mariko is now married and that her father has returned and has forced her to marry for influence. Wolverine won't let, that just lie and that be good enough. So he heads to Mariko's family estate, where he finds Mariko with a black eye, and that her husband has beat on her, and he, is not just going to let that lie. So he fights his way through her father's house and eventually ends up in a fight with her father, who challenges him to fight for Mariko's honor. And during the fight, her father escalates the fight to make Wolverine look dishonorable in Mariko's eyes. She eventually snubs him, leaving Wolverine a broken man. And that's where the issue ends. This book, I mean, if you haven't read this miniseries and you're a Wolverine fan, you absolutely need to drop what you're doing and read it. Matt, I know you've read this, or I feel like you have.
Yes, I've read that. I think that's really funny that you. Well, I feel like Matt's probably read this.
Yeah,
this was this was my first major purchase in my comic book collecting pathway as a child.
Yeah, and it's something as a Wolverine fan you probably need to go back every now and then and read, because it gives a lot into who he is as a person, and a lot of the things that they still use when writing Wolverine today. A lot of the things that motivate him and give him his drive, you see that early in the series.
When I was a kid and I read this series, I could tell that this was written for an audience that was older than me, because I'm like, this is
not a kid's book.
Yeah, it was like, wow, this is not the Wolverine. This is not the Wolverine I'm accustomed to reading, and with the exception of a few panels. Most of it's an introspection to,
It really is. It gives you the in-depth on who he is, more than just this fighting machine that you kind of know him as. Just the scene where he's tracking this bear, and he doesn't want to kill the bear, but he's forced to.
Well, that part was right on par for me reading that. I mean, you'd see that in like the old X-Men books occasionally. He'd go off on those kind of tangents, and it's just what I was referring to is his relationship with Mariko. That's really, I'm like, wow, this is a lot of Wolverine romance that I'm not accustomed to reading. Yeah. as an 11-year-old, that didn't exactly strike home with me.
But I mean, as far as the bear, I'm just talking about, it really shows his humanity that sometimes you didn't see, because he's kind of portrayed as a fighter, and just a pure fighter, and that he's being forced to hunt this bear out of, trying to save human lives.
Well, and I think what that really goes to show is this idea that Logan has a relationship and a connection to the innocent things in the world.
That's right.
Specifically animals, and specifically things that don't have their own autonomy, because he didn't have his own autonomy for a long time. And I think that goes to show like the leaps and bounds he will go to respect those things. And if he has to avenge those things, kind of the same relationship I think that he's always had with characters like Kitty Pryde and Jubilee, these young women who get overlooked and put down constantly, or maybe even like we were talking about earlier, these connections to the Reavers and how he takes on a fatherly role to the clone children that he has that are not named Daken. But like in those few pages, I think they really did a great job inundating people, like myself, who before this, most of what I knew from about Wolverine came from the animated series, or what little comics that I had that were X-Men, because this came out long before I ever really delved into the history of those characters.
Right.
And, to speak to what Matt's talking about, the most I ever connected as far as like any type of physical attraction or a longing for a human relationship was with Jean Grey. Maybe Lady Deathstrike, but that didn't turn out well. And there was always an attribution of relationships lead to violence with that connection. Between the two figures, it was an attraction and a fear at the same time. And so to see Logan in this situation, where it leads from an innocent creature who's been harmed to a woman who's being beat by her husband. Not that I'm trying to make the connection between women and powerlessness in general, or women and animalism.
Well, it's definitely a commentary on the Japanese social constructs.
Well, not only that, I think it's commentary on men.
Yeah.
Just like masculinity, and even a character who is, as like Matt says, as hyper masculine as Wolverine, you can still use that to. I don't know. I kind of subscribe. It's weird, but I've listened to podcasts like. Jay and Miles Explain the X-Men, and read a bunch of different like academic writings that relate Wolverine in some of his better ways of being written to an aspect of feminism, and how he does stand up for he uses patriarchal notions of masculinity to undermine the patriarchy, and like those things to me are fascinating. And I think Clairmont and Miller did a really good job of illustrating that. Whether or not they meant to or not is an entirely different story. But I think it's there. I think that context is within those pages.
Well, and one thing you brought up was Frank Miller there, and I believe this is the first time we see Wolverine in his brown and yellow suit. Is that not correct?
No.
Was he in it in the X-Men books?
Yeah.
Before that? Oh, okay. But yeah, I love that, looking at Frank Miller drawing him in that costume, and from different angles, he actually looks like a Wolverine in the illustrations, which, you know, I don't get that very often in today's drawings of Wolverine. Even when he's wearing that same brown and yellow costume, you don't see the animalistic look of Wolverine, and how he got that name. When you look at Frank Miller's drawings of him, you're going, oh, well, you can definitely see why they called him Wolverine.
Yeah, he's definitely way more of a drawn to be way more of a pretty boy. Which is weird.
Well, even that, I mean, there's scenes where you don't see his face in this, where Frank Miller just blacks out his face in this miniseries, and all you see is the costume, or it'll be a kind of a angled head down shot, and he looks like a Wolverine more than a man in those shots. And it really is, you know, it's Frank Miller before he became the Frank Miller we know him as today, when he was still drawing in a more of a house style, traditional Marvel style artistic level. And I really enjoyed going back to that and seeing Frank Miller as he used to be versus today's Frank Miller. But I mean, and there's nothing wrong with Frank Miller doing Frank Miller's thing in Frank Miller's universe, but I don't want to ever have to see him draw Batman again. But that's a different story.
Craig,
but actually, you know,
I was going to ask, I don't know if you have it sitting in front of you or not, and if not, no big deal, but you might have said this earlier, but who was inking him on this?
Yeah, it's Joseph Rubinstein.
Okay, Joe Rube. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so you know, and he did great. Yeah, I mean, everything. The art is absolutely fantastic in this miniseries, as is the story. As Matt talked about earlier, seeing Wolverine actually in love and having this romance in the background of it, because Mariko's not the only love interest in this story, in this miniseries. So it is a very different side of Wolverine than you're used to seeing.
I want to put Matt in kind of a rock and a hard place situation. Who draws the better Wolverine, Jim Lee or Frank Miller?
Man.
Under pressure.
Boy. If I had a gun to my head, I'm going to say the old Frank Miller.
Okay. Yeah.
Let me rephrase that. The young Frank Miller. Frank Miller.
The old Frank Miller worked the young Frank Miller as a person.
You know, Jim Lee's value to me is in pinup illustrations more than anything.
Yeah. I agree. I tend to lean that way too. Especially when Joe Rube is inking him. And a lot of that I would love, and you know, some of this is out there online. If people want to go digging for it, you can find the original pencils that Frank did for this stuff, for Daredevil, for a lot of his work, and then you can see the inked product, and a lot of it, and I think this really points towards the importance of an inker in that era. I don't know that the inker as it's done today is necessarily as important because of digital rendering and all that fun stuff. But a lot of that is actually Joe Rube, and you know, even Klaus Janson when he was inking.
I think in today's era, most of the pencilers do their own inking anymore.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I agree with you. That back
Miller,
then, especially, an inker make all the difference.
Yeah. Miller has always been a rough pencils guy. Like they're really rough. So the inker has always done a hell of a lot of work and actually what the finished product looks like. It's because Miller is notorious for having rough pencils. No doubt about it. He's a perfect example of that.
So go read this if you're a Wolverine fan. If you haven't read it, you need to have read it. Even if you're not a Wolverine fan, if you're just a fan of good storytelling, because this really, to me, shows Chris Claremont at some of his height of his work. Go read it.
He was at the height of his powers when he wrote that story.
Yeah.
Chris Claremont was.
Yeah, for sure.
I never realized how much of a connection Chris Claremont had to Wheezy Simonson until recently. And I was reading some of that, and there's another woman who was an editor/writer. She did the Daredevil.
I know who you're thinking of. I can't think of her name either.
Why can't I think of her name? I was listening to another podcast and listening to a thing where they were talking about his connection to those two figures and how much they played a role into helping him construct, and Ascenti, that's who I'm thinking of. Helping him construct the X-Men universe overall, and how much of an important role he was into ensuring that those women and those women's voices were respected and garnered and given credit to. And so I think some of that also shows in the way that he writes Wolverine as well. I think there's a lot of his and I'm not one who pretends like Chris Claremont is a gleaming bastion of everything that is good in the world. I think he's got plenty of faults and flaws that are both storied and plenty. But in this case, I think this is a lot of his personal ideology towards a work ethic and what we need to see in the industry going forward, which was really cool. When you think about it in that way, it's nice.
I recently heard a story. I was listening to an interview with this guy called himself, and I guess he was a comic book journalist.
Yeah.
And he was telling the story where he actually went to watch the movie Logan with Chris Claremont.
Oh, wow.
And they asked him, like, well, what did Chris think of the movie? And he said, well, all he said when we left was, it's pretty unlikely they'll let him cross the Mexican border in a limo with bullet holes in it. Yeah.
Oh.
He's not wrong.
He's not wrong.
He is not.
Well, Matt, let's toss the mic over to you and let you drop it like you always do. What are you reading this week?
So, also to delve in a little deeper into the aspects of a character that you don't often see that causes reflection, my work that I've picked up to talk about is from 1994. It's a collaboration work between Wizard Magazine, look it up, kids, and Chaos Comics, also look it up, kids. So these two got together to give us Lady Death 1/2. A lot of you are probably wondering what the fuck that means, 1/2. Well, it's half of a comic book that Wizard Magazine would get together with certain publishers to release as a special edition limited release thing that you'd get along with your Wizard Magazine that you purchased. I was a Wizard Magazine subscriber back in the day, and I loved Wizard Magazine. However, this particular issue I missed upon initial release, so I had to go back and buy it on the aftermarket. I'll come back to that later. The creative team on this is Mr. Brian Pulido. He is the writer and creator of Lady Death. The illustrator is Stephen Hughes, who did all the illustrations for Lady Death back in the day. Colorist is Jason Jensen. Again, he was pretty consistent with all the Lady Death pieces. And the lettering was done by Mr. Patrick Owsley. The opening page, there's a small paragraph that gives you some insights into this work. And I'll read as thus. We at Wizard are extremely proud to join Brian Pulido, Stephen Hughes, and all the good people at Chaos Comics in bringing you this very special Lady Death 1/2 issue. I'm sure the final result will overjoy people who are already fans of the woman who seeks to destroy all life on Earth and send the converted looking for more. By the time you read this, chances are Lady Death will have spent nearly a year on the Wizard Top 10 Comics list. And there's a reason for that. It doesn't take a genius to know that when you've got the perfect combination of fantastic story, art, and characters, you're going to get your money's worth and more. But go and read the story from the opening passage to the closing words. It's 100% solid. Also, check out our in-depth interview with the creators of the Lady Death saga and enjoy the exclusive sketchbook art available only in this issue. Signed, Jared Seamus, the Big Cheese is his title. So we open the story and we see Lady Death's castle, is the way I would describe this. It's on what looks like a floating island with a crooked pathway and spikes lining the pathway with, of course, severed heads decorating the spikes. And the opening passage is, to know her story is to know a woman cursed. She's the queen of all that is dead and dying, the incomparable, unforgettable Lady Death. And she is in deep introspection within her lair. She's talking to herself about the father of lies being Lucifer, and how long has it been since he cursed me? Eons, as she answers her own question. But thanks to her emissary, quote, the evil one, I'm closer now than ever to my goal of Megadeth. Megadeth?
Hey.
What would Mother think of me now? She says to herself. So as the story goes, Lady Death is wandering her hellscape. She's lamenting on the demise of her mother, and she notices a small cathedral in the distance. She is curious about its presence in her realm. She enters the construct to investigate. She finds her old boyfriend from the material plane. Look that up, kids, if you don't know how Lady Death exited the material plane. He is conjuring the, quote, energies of darkness in order to silence Lady Death. And he conveniently proclaims this aloud as she enters the room. Well, our girl isn't all about that. So she fights her ex-boyfriend with the intent to vanquish him from her realm. As they fight all evil magic style, he pleads with her to remember the matters of the heart. And she lets him know that it was an oversight, that he was not vanquished along with Lucifer when she conquered hell. Then she explodes his heart because irony and proclaims, I am Lady Death.
Because irony.
And that is the ending of the story. So obviously you're hungry for more with such an ending, and you'll go out and chase down all the Lady Death issues that you can, as I did. And I know what you're thinking. Matt, how do we know that you have an authentic Wizard Chaos Comics?
I know how you do.
1/2. How do we know this isn't one of those bootlegs that's floating around the industry that everybody knows about and few can avoid? Well,
I know how you know.
With this is a certificate of authenticity. I have a certificate of authenticity, and it is signed by the publisher of Wizard Press and the editor-in-chief of Wizard Press, proclaiming that this is a 100% authentic Lady Death 1/2.
Yeah, it is
it
is not the forgery.
How much did you spend getting it framed?
I only spent $20 in 1995 to purchase this Lady Death comic. And I know what you're thinking. Yes, this is going to fuel my retirement.
So the only 1/2 issue that I have actually is it's a 1/2 that they did with the Incredible Hulk. And I forget what year that was, But that is the only one that I know of that I have. I miss things like Wizard Magazine, as hokey as it could be. But I do miss it. I wish we had something like that now, because I guess the modern day equivalent of that is something like CBR, and
Yep.
it does not fulfill the happy space in my heart that Wizard Magazine had.
Well, Wizard didn't take itself too seriously. There were a lot of really, I read Wizard magazine, one for the insights into the industry, and two, for the fun. It was fun to read. They did hilarious stuff. They had price guides at the back of every issue, and I loved reading the price guides because if they did pictures, they just do random pictures of whatever card or comic book that they were talking about, and they would put subtitles below it, making a joke out of whatever that picture was, and they were always laugh out loud funny. I really liked every issue had artist or writer or editor interviews. They did fantasy movie casting. Those were a lot of fun to read. They'd say, what if they made an Amazing Spider-Man number 300 movie? Who's going to be Venom? I still remember to this day, they had Howie Long, the football player, to play Eddie Brock. And I was like,
oh
holy
my God.
crap, perfect. Physical casting. If you look at the character,
casting, for sure.
Yeah, look at Howie Long back in the day. It's like, dude, that's Eddie Brock all day long.
So, Matt, here's the big question. Do you have the Velvet edition, the Gold edition, or the signed edition?
I have the original, bro. I have the original.
These are all originals.
The Lady Death 1/2 original edition that would have came with your Wizard.
So the mail-in edition.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I have both the Gold edition and the mail-in edition
of the 1/2. Now
of the 1/2. Yes.
Okay. Was that the first Lady Death 1/2? Okay, it's the 1994. Okay, son of a bitch.
You're making Matt question the legitimacy of his copy there, Craig. He's getting nervous.
I've got several gold.
They had
silver
5 editions.
Yeah,
yes.
I've got a few different gold and silver cover Lady Death comics in my collection.
Do you have a jewel encrusted one?
No, I wouldn't buy those. The gold and silver is as wacky as
far
I
as
get
you
with
got.
it.
Yeah.
I have a Brian Pulido signed jewel encrusted Lady Death comic that I will gift to you next time I see you, brother.
Man, I can't wait.
So I had the opportunity to meet Brian in 2012. Fun guy to be around. But also he's a person that I don't think gets nearly enough, and this is backing away from Lady Death a minute, but just to his works in general. I don't think he gets enough credit for what he's done for the industry at large, especially when it comes to self-publishing. Other than maybe Dave Sim, and that's disregarding the cretin that he's become. I can't think of too many people that have had such an important impact on crowdsourcing comics than Brian Pulido. I mean, this dude, he number one, he has a very niche and very dedicated customer base, but he really he set the bar on how to use things like the internet and digital media to raise money for comics that avoid having to go through these major publishers. I mean, especially once he finally got Coffin Comics, which is what his stuff is, I think now. He had sold it and sold the rights to some of his stuff through Avatar Press, but in the past kind of 5 to 10 years, he's gotten all of that stuff back, and just the dude will raise $100,000 to sell 4 comics in 45 minutes. He doesn't. He now works almost completely outside of needing things like Diamond or Lunar.
Well, he always issues the comics through Diamond after the fact. But it's months later.
But he gets them done, and he gets them sourced and paid for. He's not relying on them to hold up his brand. And to me, he just is really, he really is. He is as important to things like crowdsourcing comics and to avoiding major publishers and for independent creators to produce and actually be able to make a living off of their production without voiding things, as somebody like Karen Berger was to recreating the shape of what comics looks like in the 90s. I really like, and I mean that, and I know the full weight of what that sounds like. I think he's literally that important to the idea of independent comic creation. And I don't think he gets nearly enough credit for that.
I mean, you can't really argue that.
Yeah. You don't got to tell me, man. I got these Lady Death comics.
Oh, I know you do. Matt, are you
So
familiar?
do you collect
Craig,
any of
sorry.
the other half issues? I'm sorry. Because I've got a few Evil Ernie I have, and and I've got a couple more. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I've got, the Max 1/2. I've got, I've got a lot of the Image 1/2 issues. I tried to get all of those, definitely.
Yeah.
Matt, are you familiar with the website comicartfans.com?
Oh, yeah.
Because I know you're not necessarily an original art collector, but if you get on comicartfans.com, you should go look at our buddy Frank Lanza's gallery. He is a huge Lady Death fan and has he spent a small fortune on collecting gorgeous pieces of Lady Death works, from literal covers to other people's take on Lady Death to pages. It's like his collection is insane, and he's also a good dude. So shout out to that guy. But yeah, you should take a minute to go search his stuff. I think you'd enjoy just sitting there and watching the gallery float by.
Yeah, nice.
Art porn. It's always fun.
Yeah, it qualifies.
Right. Sometimes specifically.
Mm-hmm.
So I read, like, if somebody is to listen to this episode or they are to see a graphic of the comics that we talked about on this episode, it would look like a which one of these things is not like the other thing, because the thing I'm going to talk about this week, and the thing that I really did enjoy immensely this week, is nothing at all like the books that you have talked about, and that's not a qualitative thing. It's just way different. The book is called Heartstopper, and it's by a writer named Alice Oseman. And I use the term book loosely. It's been formatted into a book. It's now presented in a kind of a graphic novel format, but it started off as a web series, and it actually started off as a spin-off web series to one of Alice's other series. And I forget which one it was because I haven't particularly read that one. But essentially in her main series, she had these two characters. And they were just kind of side characters, but they were such a big hit that she had to create their own story. And that's what gave rise to Heartstopper. So Heartstopper is the story of these characters, Charlie and Nick. They are both high school students, and it's very CW. Matt's gonna fall asleep while I'm talking about this, just because it's very CW, very cutesy, and so it kind of centers around Charlie, who's this main character, and Charlie he's the only out kid, the only out gay kid in his school. And that has caused him in the past a lot of trouble, but he's gotten past the initial shock and all of it. People kind of just treat him normally. It's been normalized enough to where his average day is not harsh. He doesn't have anybody going out of his way to beat him up or anything. The story's not necessarily about that. The story is about him finding, what everybody else has. Adolescent love, or whatever you want to call it, the boyfriend. The crushy relationships that straight kids get to have without question, and gay kids kind of just don't. So, like I said, Charlie's came out. He's kind of that kid everybody likes. Everybody appreciates him. He's smart. He's funny. He's not a bad looking kid. He kind of goes about his business. But here lately, Charlie has kind of been having issues because he actually does have somebody that he likes. There's another boy, this boy named Ben, who ends up being kind of a douche that, Ben is secretly gay. They meet up to make out and do, like, it's nothing overtly sexual, but they're just teenagers meeting up to kiss and hang out and explore their sexuality in a sense. But Ben's, like I said, is deeply in the closet and kind of just treats Charlie like shit. Like he's, he texts him, he wants to meet up on his schedule. He won't let Charlie talk about it. He won't go anywhere with him. He wants to keep it very secret. He's asking Charlie in a sense to go back in the closet. And, Charlie he's not about that. Like he worked hard on accepting who he is and being out in the open and in the public, and being known as being like the gay kid at school. And so he kind of wants to break things off with Ben, and it's hard because he longs for companionship. Like he longs to have somebody that he can experience this relationship with, but he also doesn't want it to be a dirty little secret. So he breaks things off with Ben, and it doesn't really go well. Ben's very verbally abusive to him, is threatening to do all kinds of things, but Charlie knows that, number one, he's not going to do those things anyway because that would be outing himself, and he's not ready to be outed. But one day, Charlie comes to school, and he notices this kid who's a year older than him. They kind of get stuck in this school group together. You know how when you're in high school, you could pick and choose what classes you would take, and sometimes maybe you were taking biology. You would take it with a kid from a grade above you that decided not to take it the year before. So he gets stuck in this work group at school with this kid named Nick. And Nick is kind of your quote-unquote all-American boy. He's, and this, I should say, this takes place in England, so maybe he's the all-England boy. He's an amazing rugby player, student athlete, liked by everybody. Kind of this golden child, but is generally seen, I guess everybody kind of defaults him as straight, and he thinks of himself as straight. He doesn't, he hasn't ever had to question his own sexuality. And what this book does is this book juxtaposes those two characters. And, there's always in gay culture, if you are gay, like I think all of us have probably fell for the straight boy, at least once or twice. Because you develop these emotions with somebody and they are straight and you have to respect that, but it's hard. But this is actually kind of a happy story because everything is not what it seems. So as the year goes on and they work together in the school and they hang out, they develop a really close friendship. Nick actually starts to develop feelings for Charlie, which Nick had never explored these, and so it's kind of hard for him to figure out what this is, and it's kind of hard for him to admit it to himself and kind of everybody else, but specifically to Charlie, like things start getting a little awkward, as you might expect to be around. One day, Ben rounds a corner, or not, Nick rounds a corner, and he sees Ben, the closeted kid, really getting up in Charlie's face. Just trying to, honestly, borderline assaulting Charlie, not violently but sexually, trying to make Charlie kiss him, trying to enact this relationship without he's abusing his position, really. And Nick's not having it. Nick steps up, runs the dude off. Really, he uses his fact that he's a football player and kind of a bigger dude to intimidate Ben and kind of kick Ben to the curb, and he doesn't let this take place. Well, as you might imagine, this does nothing but exacerbate Charlie's attraction to Nick. Like he's like kind of this savior complex. But this whole time, Nick is dealing with the fact that he is almost jealous of what he saw. He realizes that he wants to be the person that Charlie wants to kiss and to hang out with after school and to do these things, and as more of just not even necessarily just a friend, as a boyfriend. And so he starts doing things that makes Charlie hang out with him. Outside of school, he's almost manipulating it, and Charlie is kind of in the back of his head wondering, like stop doing these things, because I have a huge crush on you, and being around you hurts, and I know that you're straight and you're not interested in me, and so I don't know why you keep asking me to do these things when it's just going to end up hurting me. But he's smitten, so he does them anyway. To his own credit, we don't think about gay kids being athletes a lot of times, or openly gay kids, but Charlie is. Charlie's a student athlete. He's on the track team, and bruh, the dude's fast. Like he's a track star. Nick sees him running one day and realizes that they could use these skills on the rugby team. Like they need a fast person on the rugby team, so he shoehorns Charlie into the rugby team, and Charlie is not a physical contact kind of person, so he's really not sure why that they're doing this and where this is going to go, or even if he needs to be there. But Nick says, "No, dude, you're going to be fine. Let me teach you how to teach you the rules," which inevitably lends up to Charlie tackling Nick, which is a really cutesy little scene. At the end of it, as there always is in these adolescent high school stories, there's a dance party, right? Like there's a school get together where they're going to be going stag by themselves, and they're going to meet up and hang out. And everybody on the sidelines kind of knows, they kind of see what's happening. Charlie's sister realizes what's going on, at least in the aspect of her brother is struggling to deal with this friendship and the attraction that is aside from the friendship. Charlie has another friend who totally calls it. He's like, yeah, that's not a straight boy, dude. Like you have a boyfriend and neither one of you know it. And so as they get to this party, things kind of come to a head. Ben again shows up and tries to make a scene. Really, really hurts Charlie, publicly embarrasses Charlie, is just kind of a major dick. And Nick all but whips this dude's ass. He doesn't go as far as doing that, but he lets it known real quick that's about what's going to happen. And he goes and finds Charlie. And, spoilers, by the end of the story, they're sitting there in a very quiet moment where they're just kind of open and honest to one another about where they're at. And again, these are 16-year-olds. These are not adults. And they kind of decide that, yeah, they should probably be boyfriends. And Nick comes out and joins Charlie as being the other openly gay kid at school. And there are, at least to my knowledge, 3 or 4 of these graphic novels already out right now, so they stay together for a long time. This just kind of is the roots of how they got to be a couple, and it is exactly what it sounds. It is cheesy. It is high school drama. It is cutesy. It's really queer. But on the other hand, the story does some things that I really appreciated, even because I don't normally buy into the CW stuff. Like I'm not normally, my husband loves watching shows on CW and these things like Love, Simon, if you guys remember that movie, or there's a spin-off television show now called Love, Victor. Like he likes that stuff. I don't buy into it as much, but this is in that world. And as I was watching it, or as I was reading the story, I kept waiting for the quote unquote gratuitous sex scene, or for them to really sexualize these two individuals, and they didn't do it. And I'm glad, because I was kind of, I didn't want that moment to come. They kind of take sex out of the idea of sexuality, and that doesn't happen in queer stories a lot, because even, the world at large, be it from the straight community or the gay community, a lot of times they break down queerness, they break down being gay into just sex, and it's not that. It's about attraction, which all things are, right? But you don't have to immediately cross the threshold into physicality, and Alice really avoids that, and I can't appreciate that enough, because it does allow, especially in today's era, it allows the exploration of same-sex attraction, of human emotions. But it centers it in a place that the relationship is important, and that the personal day-to-day connection is important, and that's actually what matters, and that's how you build a relationship, and that's how you create a strong foundation for two people who are going to go on and live together. And I think that is missing in queer culture, in queer stories. It also removes the idea of, especially with gay boys, being hyper effeminate. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I want to say that for anybody who's listening off the bat. I don't think that there is anything wrong with being quote unquote effeminate or overtly queer, or I don't judge masculinity on that scale. But there is an idea, at least from the outside looking in, and I know from my own experience, having those moments where I didn't feel like I was quote unquote gay enough to fit into the gay community. I didn't feel like there was a place for me, that just because I'm not naturally flamboyant, maybe is the wrong word to use, but I think that's the only word I have in my arsenal to use. I'm not a flamboyant dude, and sometimes I felt like I didn't have a place. I wish I had this book when I was circa 2007, when I was coming out in college, because I am somebody who loves sports. I love football. I played football in high school. I wish I had this book before I came out, so I would have at least had a roadmap or an idea of what is okay and what's not okay, and to accept those things to myself. In the way that these characters did. And And so, yeah, I just like I read it. I immediately bought the next two graphic novels because I want to see where these things go. I want to see how they interact with the other characters in the story. But I think that this is, and we've said it on the show before, representation matters, especially for people who don't normally see themselves, who don't normally have this idea that they can exist in the world outside of stereotypes. Even gay people have that problem, right? Like I said, I spent a long time feeling lost and alone because I was too gay to fit into the straight world and too gay to fit into or too straight to fit into the gay world. Again, air quotes being used, but that's not necessarily the case. And as I grew up and traveled and moved to larger places and developed relationships inside these communities, and I realized that there's no right or wrong way to be a queer person. There's no right or wrong way to be a man. There's no right or wrong way to exist in the... Well, I mean, there's a couple of wrong ways to exist in the world, but that's, don't kill people and don't hurt people. But I would have loved to have had something like this. So it meant a lot to me when I finished the book. And, I mean, I seriously, I think you don't have to be a gay kid to like this book. You don't have to be a gay man, a queer person to read this book. You don't necessarily have to be somebody who looks for these really character-driven and really introspective books. And you don't necessarily have to be somebody who likes quote-unquote high school drama. And I hope somebody's keeping a tally on how many times I've used the phrase quote-unquote in this, because I should put a quarter in the swear jar. But I think it's acceptable. I think it's approachable to everyone. And I think everyone would benefit from reading a story like this, just for the aspect of acceptance, like personal acceptance. Like, that's the hardest thing in anything, no matter where you're at in life. Like, accepting something to yourself that's really hard is the worst part. Like, then you get to move on and you get to talk to other people about it, and you get to, not even dealing with sexuality, but that self-acceptance is the hardest part, and admitting to yourself that you're just kind of okay to be you is extremely difficult. So check this book out. I ordered them off Amazon, but I know that there are, like I said, it's an ongoing web series. Alice Oseman's got 17 web series. She's an award-winning comics creator who, in our circle, in the direct market circle, doesn't, nobody knows who she is. I didn't know who she was. I'm stepping on my own toes here. I was ignorant to what the work that she put out, but as soon as I started Googling her name and just realized what all she's doing and the awards that she's won and how beloved she is to the comics community outside of the superhero market, she's a force to be reckoned with. I'm going to be reading a lot more of her stuff, because she does a really good job about getting you interested in the quiet moments of life. And that's something that more and more, as loud as the world is, and as that continues to grow louder, I'm kind of looking for. So go check it out. And if either one of you want it, like I said, I've got the first volume. I'll be happy to loan it to you. It's a thick book. As I'm trying to pull up a page number. So I think it's 264 pages long, but it took me 2 hours to read it. Her cartooning's not hyper detailed. It's very cartoonish. There's not a lot of lines in this. She's not trying to overburden you with backgrounds most of the time. Most of the time the facial expressions are very minimal, but each of her characters does have a very unique look. She uses what she has very well. And she's really consistent with the shapes of people, if that makes sense. Whereas some people might put a lot of detail into the smallest lines possible to make something really noticeable. What she makes noticeable is the shapes of these people's bodies and faces, and she carries that throughout. Her expressionism is really, really, it's cute, but it's almost ingenuously done. Just what she decides that she needs to put can pull off an entire mood of these people. There's one scene where, again, Charlie is admitting to his sister that he has fallen for the straight boy, and he has this kind of goofy, if you think of an emoji like that drunk emoji where it's a squiggly mouth and it's like you can hear that sound coming through, with 4 lines. So it's really fun, man. I can't encourage people to read this book enough. And most likely your local library has a copy of this too, because apparently it's really well known, and I straight up just missed the boat on this.
That happens to all of us from time to time. Miss the boat on a comic that has been out for a minute. You just Didn't know it existed. Sounds like a fun read, though.
It really is. Like I said, it took me off guard because I wasn't expecting to enjoy it as much as I did, just because it's not something, like I said, I don't like these little high school dramas. And I knew that's what it was, but I was like, let me check it out anyway. It's a gay story, I'll read it. And then kind of fell in love with it. Really hard. Like I said,
That's awesome, man.
I had to order these other ones. So take a chance on books is, I guess, the moral of that story.
I mean, I agree. Read books that are outside of your comfort level. You might find something you like.
You know how you can do that?
You can go to your comic book store on Wednesdays.
Yes, if you are able to. Another way you can do that is by listening to podcasts like ours.
Oh, yeah.
Or if you're somebody who listens to podcasts and you have somebody in your life who maybe isn't, who is looking for other things and they can't figure out what to buy, you could recommend our podcast to them. That would be super helpful.
That would be.
And that would help us grow as that would help them grow as people, because you become like at least 10% of a better person the minute you listen to the first SFG episode, I think, in my opinion. Now that's been proven through scientific study that like our show does make you a better person. So I just want to reinforce that to start off with. But it also helps.
I want to see this so-called study.
Don't step on my toes here, Craig. Shh. Tell them it's real.
Oh,
people,
yeah, of course.
People love fake news now. They love it. They'll take me at my word.
Yeah.
So if you enjoy our show, recommend our show to a friend. Help grow the people that listen to our show. We would really appreciate it. And in the spirit of that, in the spirit of telling people, suggesting things to people, historically on our show, and something that I personally think we should keep doing, especially this episode, is give people a wink wink and a nod nod, a hint, if you will, about what's coming out next week. Some things that they might not be aware of, some things that they might want to put on their pull list, or call their comic shop and ask them to order for them. Because New Comic Book Day is now technically it's Tuesday and Wednesday now, but it's there's New Comic Day midweek now that we have multiple distribution services. And so we like to give people a little taste of what we might be grabbing this next week, or if something's collected and coming out that we really loved and maybe somebody else missed, here's your chance to pick it up. You guys cool if I jump in here first?
Yep.
All right, so I'm actually going to suggest one of those collected series that I was just telling you about. This has actually been out for a while, but it's never been collected like this. And this is kind of a first time, and it's a great way to get a full series of amazingness all in one book. And that book is none other than Blacksad, the Collected Stories trade paperback. So Blacksad, if you don't know, is created by Juan Diaz-Calls and Juanjo Garnido. It's published by Dark Horse. And Blacksad is kind of this... I lost the word I was going to use. So Blacksad is he's a cat, but he's a detective cat. It's this anthropomorphized version of a kind of a noir detective story. And this collects, like it started 20 years ago, and this collects all of that. Dude is constantly just dealing with trouble. Curiosity tends to kill the cat, and he's a cat that's very curious. And he gets involved with women that are gonna get him killed. They're just as bad as the criminals that he takes down. He solves murders. It really is a noir detective story told through an anthropomorphic cat, and the art is stunning. The art is absolutely gorgeous. If you have never seen a Blacksad page, you need to go to Google and pull it up and let it change your life, because it will do so. It's the hotness, and this book is coming out. It is 304 pages of amazingness, and
damn.
Yeah, you can get it for the low price. If you bought it at full price, it's $30. Chances are, if you have a good LCS like we do, you're going to get it at a discount. And if you have a pull list at places, you're going to get it at a discount. So, for $24, you're going to get 304 pages of stories. And that's badass, especially of noir detective story. So put it in your life. You needs it.
Go ahead, Matt. You go next.
So I'm looking forward to, this is very much within my wheelhouse, from Image Comics, John Layman and Dan Boltwood. This is Chew number 1, spelled CHU, unlike the other Chew series that John Layman did with Rob Guillory, spelled CHEW. This issue is called The First Course. Part 1, Tony Chew is a Sibopath, able to get psychic impressions from what he eats. That was the main character in the original Chew series. Saffron Chew is a Sibopars, able to learn secrets from who she eats with. So this is basically a spin-off, and or maybe you can call it a continuation of the original Chew series, which is excellent, and I recommend to everyone. So I'm looking forward to see where this is going in that universe.
That's why I had you go next, because I was scared I was going to steal your book.
Yeah, I was scared you were going to steal it too.
Yeah, can I just say I'm a little disappointed because I had like $10 riding on you two getting into fisticuffs over who got to talk about this book, and I'm kind of sad that you solved this problem like adults, and that both like you were willing to just allow.
No, so you're projecting maturity onto us that we do not possess. we are fucking tired.
My book is going to be Bliss number 1 by Image Comics as well. Did either of you guys read Coyotes?
I started it and dropped it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did the same. I started it and didn't finish it just because, and for no other reason that I just it got lost in the shuffle.
Okay. Well, I loved Coyotes, and this is the same creative team, Sean Lewis and Caitlin Yarsky. And there's a drug called Bliss wiping away memories in Feral City. A good-hearted young man overwhelmed by a deathly sick child and distraught wife makes a deal to become a personal hitman to 3 gods, killing those in their way and sending memories down the river of oblivion. So I'm interested in this because of the creative team, because I really did like Coyotes a lot. So it was a good, interesting werewolf story, except it was coyotes. But yeah, coyote wolf, coyote story.
I will have to make sure I pick that up because I'm intrigued. Sounds good.
Yeah. It's a miniseries. It's 8 issues long. So
nice.
Yeah.
Well, do we have anything else we need to talk about, suggest, throw out there, put into the world, birth into existence?
Did see that they are releasing The Walking Dead in a deluxe edition, single issues, colorized. So you'll be able to buy all 193 issues colored.
How do you? So as I don't have a dog in this fight because I personally really don't care. But how do you feel about The Walking Dead being colored?
I don't care. I'm probably not going to buy it.
Yeah. I saw some people who had, I saw everything from really encouraging to very visceral reactions.
I mean, I don't care one way or the other. I thought it was great the way it was done. I thought that it fit that world to be black and white.
Yeah.
But it may be, I may pick up the first 10 issues or so and see how it goes, just to see it colorized. But I'm not somebody that has a major reaction one way or the other to it.
Yeah, I don't have a major reaction either, but my my immediate reaction was I like Charlie Adlard's pen and ink stuff, on its own versus his stuff after it's colored, and that may simply be because that's what I'm accustomed to seeing for so many years. Now, when I see this stuff with color work on it, I'm just like, immediately I'm like, oh, and that just may simply be because I've been conditioned to see his work in black and white for so long.
After 15 years of seeing it the other way.
Uh-huh.
The closest I can come to having a connection with something like this is I've seen people try to do Lone Wolf and Cub stories colored, and I just kind of don't look at those. Like, I see that and immediately dismiss it because so much of what I love about Lone Wolf and Cub is the lack of color, is the shading. I know, what was it, last year or year before last? Because COVID, I have no idea how time works anymore. when they did Usagi Yojimbo in color for the first time ever.
Yeah.
There was a lot of conversation about that, about whether it changed anything. But I will say, at least that was new stories, and it wasn't a recoloring of old stories. So it's a little bit
well, and I also think with Usagi, it's a different level of cartooning.
right.
And that's not to take anything away from Usagi, because I love Usagi, but it's more of a cartoony style of drawing.
Right.
Whereas Walking Dead's more of an adult style of cartooning.
Oh yeah, it's definitely more animated.
Yeah.
Esque. So
yeah.
That's curious. I'm just curious.
Yeah. I mean, I think it may be interesting to see a few issues in it. I have a feeling it'll start off with a lot of people getting it, and it'll die out over time.
Trickle down. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think everybody that has all 193 issues of The Walking Dead will collect 193 issues of the same story.
I was going to say
at the same price again.
You have a lot of speculators and completionists who will just do it just to have it.
Yeah.
So that they have the full set. So, which is always interesting. I think that drives a lot of the direct market in more ways than we really have time to explore today.
Well, I would have been more interested in them doing it in collected editions than in floppies again.
Yeah, it's really weird that they're doing it in floppies.
Yeah. Because it would have I probably would have bought the entire series in a collected edition type thing, in 3 omnibuses or whatever.
Do you think that maybe
it's
done that way, so that way they can do it as they go instead of having to put a bunch of work and pay a colorist to do 190 something issues and then drop it at once? Maybe they're trying to do it.
I'm sure, and then they'll later do it, if they get to the end of the series, actually make it to the end of the series.
It seems extremely unlikely to me that they're going to go 100 issues of the, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Before the
I mean, that's their plan, but I'm with you that I think it's going to tail off noticeably in sales as it goes.
Well, alrighty. Well, if you want more of this, maybe you have strong opinions about whether or not it should be in color. Maybe you have strong opinions about The Walking Dead. You should
or Thor's hammer.
Or Thor's which is a major crisis right now on the Facebook page. You should come to the Facebook page and you should tell us about it. Come join us. We love to talk to you. We love to hear from you. Do want to point out, you have to be nice to people when you come to the Facebook page. You can't roll in there with heat just to roll in there with heat. And just to shit on things that people are saying they like. We had somebody do that this past week. I did not remove them. They removed themselves.
I missed that.
Yeah, it was a thing. They left the group, but because I've only ever had to remove one person from that group, and that's kind of something that I'm proud of. And we don't like that. So just be nice to people. If somebody is liking something that you don't, and maybe you want to give some polite but legitimate criticism, totally cool. We do that on the show all the time. We did that with the first book we talked about tonight, or today, because it's morning time, because that's how time works. But you can't just see somebody who likes something and then tell them like they're stupid for liking it and the thing they like is garbage, and that's a reflection on them as a person. That's not cool. We don't put up with that. No. You'll get scolded.
Scroll on by.
Yeah, just keep scrolling. So don't do that. But if you're capable of not doing that, come hang out with us on the Facebook page. Or check out our Instagram and Twitter, or send us an email at southernfriedgeekery@gmail.com. If we don't have anything else, we appreciate you all. We love you all. Leave us a rating and review on the iTunes if you can. Have a great week. Stay healthy. Socially distance. Wear your mask. And go forth and love some comics.
Woo!
I try to throw Craig off by saying new and fun things before I say that and see how long it and to see how it affects his woo.
Yeah.
Oh, man.